Hello and welcome to Sessions at StudioM.com and Sessions at Studio M's YouTube channel. My name is Michael Mon, the audio instructor for Sessions at StudioM.com, an online audio recording school. Today is week number 2 of our recording tips series. Today we are going to discuss the poor man's mic locker, or a mic locker that is great to start out a recording studio with. Last week we discussed the basics of building a recording studio. Today we're going to talk about one of the foundations of that recording studio, and that is the microphone locker. Over the course of my career as a recording engineer, one of the things that has been brought to my attention many times is the mic locker. The minimum mic locker, in my opinion, that you should have are 3 microphones. You should have a dynamic microphone, a small diaphragm condenser, and like last week that we discussed, the large diaphragm condenser. Now dynamics, small diaphragm condensers, and large diaphragm condensers all come with different brands, different types, but the most general would be you have your Shure SM57 dynamic microphone. Now this microphone right here is a total workhorse. There are other types that are very much like it. Audix makes one. Pretty much every manufacturer, Beyerdynamic, makes a microphone that's kind of like the SM57. The SM57, since the 70s, has been just a studio workhorse, a live workhorse. This microphone can take you, you can hang up some acoustic treatment on the wall, put it on a snare drum, and it works. And the reason why you want a dynamic microphone in your mic locker is for the high sound pressure levels of the recording studio. So if you have an electric guitar amp, and to get the right kind of tone of, the Fender or the Marshall or whatever type of amp you have, a dynamic mic handles those high sound pressure levels better, typically better, than most condenser microphones. This is also great when you're dealing with drum sets. Having a dynamic microphone for the high sound pressure levels of the drum set. And the reason why we want this dynamic microphone is for a variety of different tasks. Has a different tonal characteristic than the condenser microphones. Sometimes the condenser microphones are just too nice to have, and the dynamic, it works just right. I've been in the studio where sometimes the large diaphragm condenser microphone is not the right microphone for a particular singer. And lo and behold, the SM57, or if you want to step up to its big brother and you have a little bit more money, the SM7 has been the perfect microphone for some singers. So sometimes this microphone beats out the large diaphragm condenser for different types of singers. Now, we'll get back to this microphone because we'll discuss some more uses, but right now, dynamic microphone. Shure SM57, great microphone. There are other brands out there. I'm not advocating any brands. We're just discussing that. Next, I want to talk about the small diaphragm condenser. Right now, you're hearing my voice on this exact same microphone. I have a pair of them. This is a Groove Tube convertible small diaphragm condenser microphone. The reason I like having a small diaphragm condenser in my studio is it's really great on instruments. Acoustic instruments is where these things shine for me. It's also really good as a drum overhead in a room that's not very well treated. It has a slightly tighter pickup pattern than some of the large diaphragms would, just mainly because the capsule size is smaller. But it's a must-have. Not this particular one. This one sounds great, and you would be happy to buy it. It's a microphone that's under $100, but there are many other brands out there that are great, and it's all personal taste and what your budget is and what you can afford. But having a small diaphragm condenser for acoustic instruments, sometimes a small diaphragm condenser on an acoustic guitar mic'd up, and then you place that into a dense mix, it's sometimes the perfect sound because it's not so big, but it's not too small, It has just the right brightness, just the right body to actually fit in the mix without having to do too much EQ. And some of that just has to do with mic placement and things like that. But the small diaphragm condenser, really, really valuable when you're dealing with acoustic instruments, and especially if your mixes are going to be a little more intense. You're going to have, full drum kit, bass guitar, multiple electric guitars, and then you want to put in acoustic guitar or sometimes violin, maybe even flute. Whatever, if you're Jethro Tull, you could add the flute. Well, the small diaphragm condenser may do just the trick, but it's really nice. The main reason I like to have it is it's just another option or another blade on your Swiss Army knife of mics. Now, the large diaphragm condenser, we showed this one last week. This is about $150 large diaphragm condenser. You can get a large diaphragm condenser starting at about $70, going on up to, if you really want some of the old vintage ones, you can spend $15,000, $20,000 on those. Why you would need to, eventually you'll start hearing the differences in the microphones, but even some of the vintage mics, I kind of prefer some of the more modern mics because of the consistency. You could get an old vintage large diaphragm microphone, and a friend of yours may have one, and it may sound fantastic, and then you go and buy one. Well, it's going to sound completely different. Part of that's just the age, how it was taken care of, where it was in the country. So some of the new modern microphones do a really, really good job. They mimic the old microphones. This particular one mimics a high-dollar large diaphragm condenser. Is it exact? No. Does it sound really good? Yes, it does. So the large diaphragm condenser is really great on most vocals. It's great on instruments with lots of low end. So I love this on bass. I also love it on vocals. I love it on cello. That's where, when we talk about the small diaphragm condenser, sometimes it just doesn't quite have the body. And of course, there are some out there that will give you the body, but in particular, large diaphragm condensers will just because of the size of the capsule, generally lead to more low end. Also, the large diaphragm condenser, really great on drums for overheads. I don't generally put them right on the toms themselves or any of the other drums. And that's mainly just because most of the drummers that I deal with are not super accurate, so I don't want this mic hit. The SM57, hammer and nail, put it on the drum, works really well. Now, you may ask, why did I choose 3 microphones? Why should you have 3 microphones in your mic arsenal? Well, main reason is, if you ever want to record a drum set, having the 3 microphones will allow you to do so. You could record the drum set with 1 microphone, and it would give you a decent sound if you put it, 4 to 6 feet in front of the kit. If your drummer's a consistent drummer, you can actually get a really, really nice microphone or a really nice drum sound. Having the 3 microphones just gives you a little more flexibility in controlling the mics or in controlling the tone of the drums. With the dynamic microphone, great to put on the bass drum or kick drum. Next week we'll be discussing the kick drum and how to record it. But this week we're discussing the microphone. So if I took my SM57, put it inside the kick drum or just outside the kick drum, depending on whether there's a hole or no hole, I would be able to control the tone. It doesn't have quite the bottom end of an actual kick drum dynamic microphone. This mic sounds generally better than the SM57 on the bass drum, but if you have a limited budget, there's, it's nice to have this, but not necessarily necessary. Not completely necessary to have that. So having that on the kick drum, the small diaphragm condenser, and as long as your drummer is not, John Bonham, real heavy-handed, any of those types of drummers. Myself, I'm very heavy-handed. So the small diaphragm condenser doesn't necessarily work on the snare for me, without being padded down heavily. But the small diaphragm condenser you can put on the snare, you can put it a little bit away from the snare, just to give you a little more presence with your snare drum. And then the large diaphragm condenser can be used as an overhead. And that will allow you to actually get a really decent sound on your drum set. And it can give you a slightly more modern sound. The one mic approach just gives you kind of more of an open sound. If you listen to old school records, where everything was recorded on one microphone, the drums sound a little distant. They don't have the presence. They don't have the punch of like a modern drum set. So if you have the 3 microphones and you have the ability to control the kick drum, the snare drum, and then the rest of the drums, if your drummer can play balanced and can listen and hear and start matching, you can really have a solid drum sound. Sometimes less is more, and you get better with it. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about that pertains to the microphone locker, the 3 mics that you're going to have. Well, the thing that you really want to have is you want to have a high-quality mic stand, or multiples. If you're going to record a drum set, you want 3 high-quality mic stands. That's the spot that I would not scrimp on. The $15 mic stand, maybe not necessarily the best mic stand to choose, especially when you're dealing with your large diaphragm condenser. The large diaphragm condenser weighs a little bit more than the dynamic microphone. So if you have a better mic stand, one that will grip, one that will hold, one that has some weight to it, so that if you have to extend your large diaphragm condenser out, it's not going to fall over. It's not going to tip. Somebody accidentally bumping into the stand isn't going to take it over. Knock it over and then dent your microphone and potentially break your microphone. So if you can, I would go with a better microphone stand than the typical $20, $19, $15 stand. While those work from time to time, you're going to end up replacing them. If you use them regularly, you'll end up replacing them once a year because little parts will break, and to buy the part is almost as much as to buy the stand, so you might as well just buy a new stand. If you buy the slightly better mic stands, it will hold your mics better, it will grip, the long-term investment is significantly better. And I'm a big fan of buying the proper infrastructure to your studio. So thank you for viewing our recording tip today. Recording tip number 2, the poor man's mic locker. My name is Michael Mon for sessionsatstudiom.com, an online audio recording school, and for Sessions at Studio M's YouTube channel. Join us next Monday for tip number 3, recording the kick drum.